Thank you for coming to this informal meeting of the members of the Ashland Citizens Budget Committee. I'm Dave Runkel, and Garrett is here with me.
Hello.
We're preparing for a full Budget Committee meeting on March 19, where we'll be reviewing the first 6 months of the two-year city budget approved last June. We'd like to have this gathering to get your views as part of our preparation for that session. So Oregon has this strange law that allows for that it's different than any other place where I've lived in the U.S., and that provides for citizen participation in preparing a budget and approving the budget and setting the tax rate. The full Citizens Budget Committee has 14 members, the mayor, the 6 council members, and the 7 citizens who are there to represent you all. And what does the Budget Committee do? Well, the city's website says that our job is simply to ensure expenditures do not exceed revenues. Well, that's what we care about. The State Revenue Department, which oversees the local budget law, prescribes 4 roles for the City Budget Committee. 1, to establish standard procedures for budgeting. 2, to encourage citizen involvement in local budgets. And I'm really pleased to see so many people here. 3, provide a method for estimating revenues, expenditures, and taxes. And 4, and this is the important one, I think, to institute a method of control of revenues and expenditures that, quote, promotes efficiency and economy in use of public funds.
Thanks, Dave. So what we are really here to do is kind of take a step back, give you the perspective of the overall budget. We switched to a biennium. So I took 2008 and 2017-19, the last one that we've done. And just overall, we're looking at, on the operating side, an increase of over 50% in the budget. And I've put this comparison here of an annual growth rate. That is equivalent, the bottom line is 16.77% a year. Comparable to that is personnel services, which grew at 15.93% per year. Materials and services, which grew at 18.79%. And if you look at inflation during this same period of time, it grew at 1.99%. So just for overall comparisons about the growth of spending. We want to step back and also define the 3 major categories in a budget. We do know what debt service is. There's personnel services, there's materials and services, and there's capital outlays. And one of the things that we stress for is more detail in some of these line items, because we really can't do much in the way of forecasting unless you know some of the component figures. I have an illustrated budget in here. So these are the major mandated categories by the Department of Revenue. You have to have at least these 4 categories in every single budget. So there is comparability. What's included in that? You can see that personnel services is salaries, fringe, miscellaneous, and then other things that are related. So there could be car allowances and healthcare pickups and other things in there. But the relevant comparison is from year to year. This is a sample of one department's operating budget, and I wanted to just show you that in this line right here, which is personnel services, there are only 2 components. And that's where our problem in understanding where forecasting is going, is to understand what is in the fringe benefit. You will start hearing numbers on the 6th about healthcare. That the healthcare costs are going to go up. Also, you'll hear PERS is going to go up. But here you can't see a breakdown of those individual items. So I want to show this as a typical budget. And then I want to give you some comparative numbers from this. So this period right here is actual. And then these are what we do through the budget cycle. In this particular department, I just grabbed one because I could fit it on the screen. Their personnel services grew at an annual rate of 3.63%. That might be normal in an inflationary environment of 1.99. That doesn't seem too bad. Fringe benefits grew at 6.13%. So if we're looking at forecasted growth of fringe benefits, we'd like to see a weighted average around there. Materials and supplies, however, grew at 9.7% a year. That seems really high. So we want to ask those questions, and we want that kind of detail. So this is how we begin analyzing the budget to see, in comparison to inflation, how are we doing? This is the Park and Rec budget. It's the whole budget. The bottom line portion of this is what everybody's talking about, and it's fund balance policy. This is where the projection for the fund balance is 5.932 million deficit. And they have revised that and will be presenting to the council a new deficit forecast somewhere around 600,000. But what are the underlying assumptions? So that's the question. And we want those to be vetted and reasonable, and then a projection, if it is going to still be negative to the tune of 600,000, that's a policy matter that they have to vote on, because that means that that's 600,000 of general fund. All of the expenditures are appropriations, and you've heard this. This is government lingo, fund accounting lingo. That's an appropriation. It's an authority to spend. At the end of the year, there is an unappropriated ending fund balance. This is what's left over from the year's revenues and expenditures. And they need that working capital to fund the startup of a new fiscal year before tax revenues come in, and also to provide themselves a cushion. So the council has decided that there is a fund balance policy, and that policy is to retain in the unappropriated fund balance 12 to 12.5% of the revenues for that particular fund. So in a budget, they forecast what the unappropriated fund balance would be. And in 2009, you can see in the wastewater fund, they forecasted $4.1 million remaining ending fund balance. And in 2017, that was reduced to $2.19 million. So if your expenditures are rising faster than your revenues, you're going to use up your unappropriated fund balance. And what a good fiscal policy would be, if that's 12% of revenues, then we should see an ending fund balance equivalent to that from year to year. Well, of course, that hasn't happened in the general fund. It hasn't happened in Parks and Rec. And you can see the reserve fund has a little bit in it, and the health benefits fund, I threw them in there because we have to have a conversation about that, and I want to show that for future reference. Here is what has actually happened. So at the end of the year, there's a comparison, and the comparison is what was the fund balance that remained. And this is the actual cash that the city has. So you can see that in the general fund, in 2009, they had 2.1 million remaining actual. And this year, 2017, at June 30, they had 4.6. That looks pretty healthy. However, they had $50 million in capital projects, and they only spent 12 million. So there's a little question about, okay, that's great, you had a good ending fund balance, but you forego a lot of expenses. The other thing I want to highlight is that the water fund and the wastewater fund in 2017 were budgeted to have 2.3 million, and they now have 7.7 in each. So there's a huge fund. Now that's supposed to be reserved for capital projects. So we want to see what those capital projects are. On the 19th, we're going to get an update of all the CIP projects, what's been done, what's completed, and what's forecast for the future. And this is created because our water fees are higher to accumulate this cash balance for capital projects. So when you see huge fund balances that are ending year over year, they're not being spent off. There's a big capital project coming. We want to know what it is. One of the issues that's come up is cost recovery. So I want to show the golf course. And I built a table of all of the actual expenses and revenues that were recorded in something called the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. This is the audited financial statements for the city. So you're going to hear this out there that we're audited all the time. And the audited statements found no irregularities. And that's true because as a matter of policy, they're doing something where they're not in full cost recovery. And that's good. There are some programs that aren't going to get full cost recovery. There are some programs that should be a cost recovery that's greater than the expenses to offset those. So like the wastewater fund and the water fund, the revenues are much higher than operations, and that's a matter of policy. So, but in the bottom line, you'll see the forecast of cost recovery. And in 2005, the golf course lost $10,000, and its cost recovery was 97%. And it went from 97 to 92 to 86 to 83 to 82 to 74. It kept going down. The cumulative losses at the golf course totals $1.7 million. So over time, starting at 10,000 till last year, which was only an estimate in the CAFRA, it's recorded as being an estimate, they lost $284,000 this year, $240,000 in 2017. What is driving this huge loss? Personnel services and materials and supplies. And so we have to ask questions about how are they spending that money today? What will they do so that they will get to a better historical average of cost recovery in any particular program?